Hello and welcome to today's Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel live stream on the subject of language and languages. So there's going to be anything to do with language that I think of or that anyone in the comments thinks of. The last time I did this stream, which was also the first time, the common thread was actually a gold mine of ideas for how to keep going on this, and I hope that that continues this time because that actually makes it really easy to fill up the air. Just gonna share this around a few more places, see if we can get some more people. Okay, so here's how I'm thinking about this in a very broad sense here, in the sense of pretty much anything. ¿Cómo está, Juan? Un placer verte acá. Yeah, so this is going to be about pretty much anything to do with language that I think of or that anyone else thinks of. In fact, if you've got some language homework that you're working on and something's got you stumped, then if it's a language that I work with, and there are quite a few of them, then why the hell not? Just chime in the comments and maybe I'll help you out. And then let me just give you a little bit of background on my background in languages, because language is kind of the main thing that I do. I'm a translator and editor most of the time, and I work with mostly exceedingly dull documents. Lately it's been mostly patents. And I translate from pretty much every major language in the EU, plus some Japanese, Korean, Russian, Yiddish, and I translate into English, German, Spanish, and on occasion Japanese. So there's a pretty wide variety of languages that I work with, and if there's anything on the subject of language that you'd be interested in talking about, you can just kind of throw that right in there. Sí, sé que ya sería bastante tarde por allá en Chile. Ya son como, a ver, ya serían como las 12:30, ¿no? Así que, bueno, gracias por unirte al canal a pesar de la hora. Yeah. So that's kind of my background on languages, and I would also am a writer. So everything I do is something to do with language when you come down to it. I mean, this is something to do with language too. So I figured that's one of my major interests, and we might as well just kind of kick this whole channel off, since these are just the first couple of streams, by talking about one of my major topics that might surprise you. Gonna see. Get a few more. Share this a few more places. See if we can't get a couple more people in here. Make sure that enough people see it. This time I actually know where the bloody link goes, which really does help. Last time I spent 5 minutes, and it's really exciting air time there, where I'm staring at the screen trying to figure out where the stream link is so that I can share it. So yeah, that was probably really a great moment in YouTube, and I'm glad to have been a part of it. So let's see. Sitting here thinking about things that I could talk about. I was kind of seeing, I guess, two people, and I think I know who both of them are. It's always takes a little bit to propagate before people I haven't heard of also start showing up. But so here's something interesting that I recently picked up. This is something I didn't even know actually, because of the way that I started learning Korean, which had to do, I mean, one of my major sources in learning it was actually North Korean television. So I had no idea that in the South they spell certain things differently. And if I knew how to put text on the screen, this would be so much easier to explain. So maybe this is actually not a particularly good topic. So we'll skip that shit. Unless somebody can explain to me how I put text on the screen, and that would be cool. All for that. Hell. One thing, I'll just kind of kick this, just as things come to mind, and really, anyone in the comments stream, feel free to jump in. It's much more interesting when we've got some dialogue going on. So, and I think it's a subject probably everybody's got some thoughts on, and yeah, anything can kick us off. Let's see. One thing that people, it seems really a disturbingly small number of people really realize that Google Translate is for entertainment purposes only. You literally don't have any way of knowing unless you already know the language anyway, and in which case you kind of don't need it. What the result is. Most people, the trouble is that they only understand one of the two languages that's evolved. How many languages do I speak? Okay, that's not a bad one. I've got about 20 working languages, and then I've got roughly another 20 odd that I speak some varying degree of. Some of them I can just barely have kind of a basic conversation in. A few of them I'm a little bit more conversational in and can have a reasonable kind of reading knowledge. But in terms of languages that I'm good enough at that I will take people's money to translate them, there are about 20 of those. Yeah, so the thing about Google Translate that people don't get is their means of assessing whether there's a good translation is good comes down to whether the result is intelligible to them. If they can read it, if it seems to kind of make sense to them, they assume that means that it's an accurate translation. That, as far as I can tell, that's got to be the only way, because the thing is, that's not the case. Very rarely is it the case. I mean, it can kind of handle really, really simple sentences. Anything beyond that, it's absolute shit at. I mean, anything that actually where the result matters, where it's you actually care whether you are correctly understanding or whether your reader correctly understands these things, really ought to be done by somebody who actually can translate, and not by what amounts to a really kind of crappy video game. Yeah, though I do admit that the results that you get out of Google they are funny. If you speak both languages, they're fucking hilarious sometimes. So I mean, it does have that going for it, but it's never something you should rely on. So just yeah. This is the bane of my existence, really, when I'm translating, because when people draft patents in English, the tendency is to assume that it's something that basically that nobody needs to really bother all that much in terms of with the translation. So often, as far as I can tell, I get patents that I can clearly tell were originally Japanese or Korean, and that somebody just ran through Google Trans and called it a day and probably took somebody's money for it, no less. Or they thought they were saving money by doing it. And the result is that I get to sit there for hours on end with page after page of completely unintelligible gibberish that has no recognizable grammar or sentence structure or really much of anything else. and somebody thinks that they've actually saved money doing that, it's great, because I mean, what really sucks about this is, really, in terms of the quality of the result, the thing is, being a translator, I'm not supposed to be correcting the original. I'm supposed to just be telling people what the original says. If the original is just completely incomprehensible crap, well, I mean, that's the original's fault. My job is just to tell them that. So really, I could just kind of put these things through Google Trans myself and call it a day, but I would feel bad about that, even though that doesn't make any fucking sense. Yes, adjusting the gain does help. I'm sort of playing around with the lighting here, because the last time I did this, I ended up having like the complexion of a patient in pathology, and I wasn't all that thrilled with that. So I decided to add another light that isn't fluorescent, see if that made any difference, and it actually enhanced the yellow tone, which actually wasn't an asset, and also sort of overexposed me. So I just turned that off. Oh well. Wow, how old was I when I learned Russian? I was well, when I started, the first time I really took an interest was I had this dictionary. It's old Random House dictionary. Well, not all that old at the time. It was from 1966, and we're talking about 1984 here. But at the back of it, it had this table. It said the alphabets of the world. Yeah, all 5 of them. It was really comprehensive. But one of them was Cyrillic. It was the Russian alphabet. And so that kind of fascinated me. There were various letters that I thought looked really cool, and I was like, okay, I'd like to learn every single thing that I can about this. And so, which wasn't easy in the 80s. I mean, there weren't a lot of really good books. I mean, you had like shitty foreign service manuals, which are in Courier, and they're hard to come by, and I find Courier font gives me a headache if I have to read it at any length. So, you know, it was slow going, but I kind of found books every once in a while that I could use, and had some people who also helped me out along the way, and I listened to these tapes that I could find to kind of work on the pronunciation. Roscoe is asking what kind of Greek influence there is in Russian. Well, the alphabet, for one thing, actually, it was Greek Orthodox monks, Cyril and Methodius, who went into Russia to try to convert people. And they had to come up with some kind of written language for Russian. And so what they did was they adapted the Greek alphabet. So you have a lot of Greek letters in there. I mean, like, well, the A, the, G, the, a lot of them are Greek or modified Greek, and then they have a few others that they threw in because they just didn't have anything to correspond to it. So there's that, and then you have a fair number of Greek words, especially in the a technical language. So there are things like that. I mean, and of course they're both Indo-European languages, so they are related. Though fairly distantly. It's more, I mean, there aren't a whole lot of, I mean, you have prefixes and suffixes and things that you find in Greek that are borrowed from Greek, roughly the same ones that you find in a lot of languages, like all the suffix ology, like biology or something. They have that too, biologia, or let me see, what others. I mean, mostly in terms of borrowings, what you've got are actually largely Latin ones. There's a fair number of those, but the main Greek influence I mean, the most prominent one certainly would be just the alphabet itself, which is, in fact, which, I mean, even the letters that don't actually look like Greek letters, some of them, like the de, which it looks like somebody took a delta, hit it with a hammer a few times, put a dent in it, and then added a couple of legs at the bottom. I mean, that's delta. I mean, except that in Greek it's pronounced like a the kind of sound, and in Russian it's just a straight up the. And that was actually one of the letters that I thought was really cool when I was about 5. I thought it looked really, it was just sort of interesting. It kind of reminded me of an old like pot-bellied stove or something. I don't know, but yeah. So you in terms of just the language itself, I mean, it's a Slavic language and most of the words are Slavic, but yeah, there's about, I would say, roughly as much Greek influence in terms of the words as there is, say, in English or Spanish or, well, most of the Western European languages. So, like words like technika, technique. I mean, that's from technika, yeah, which is Greek, or calligraphia, calligraphy, which is basically somebody just took a Greek word and changed the end of it in English. Yeah, it's literally the same thing. Kali, good, graphia, writing, good writing. And so you get things like that. So I mean, to me, as far as I can tell, that would be sort of the extent of the Greek influence, really. I mean, again, the main one being the alphabet. So what I always find interesting is that somehow in all of this, I mean, when it doesn't end up being an entirely phonetic alphabet. Because for some reason you have the g, which is like a gamma and is pronounced like g, just a hard g sound. And then for some reason, once in a while, that turns into a v sound for no apparent reason. Although in other Slavic languages, it stays a g sound even though it's the same structure. And also the great thing about speaking Russian is you can actually sort of freak out liberals in the US with it because they think everybody's Russian at this point. I mean, I actually flirted with the idea of just putting my Twitter bio in Russian and tweeting regularly in Russian just so I could fuck with that Hamilton 68 algorithm, which, if you haven't heard of it, is the source most of the time when you hear that something is being promoted by Russian Twitter accounts, that it's a Russian influence topic. And what they're going by, I mean, they don't have anything other than they have these criteria. And one of them is if it's from a source that also tweets in Russian. You know, it doesn't even have to exclusively tweet in Russian. If you have like one tweet in Russian, that will be enough for it to start marking you as a Russian influence agent. So, поэтому вот, я полагаю, что надо сказать что-то по-русски здесь, чтобы американские либералцы вот думали, что это российская операция. Yeah, because of course, I mean, we're all Russian here. It's like, and but though we have to divide our time because we're also, you know, we're also all catrochavitas and comunista como Iowa. So, yeah. So, one of interesting things that I've actually I picked this. This was from a CCC talk, Chaos Communication Congress, the one of the hacker conventions, sort of like a slightly cooler version of DEF CON. Como el ajo. Me encanta el ajo, po. Entonces me encanta tu internet, debería comérmela. Yeah. So there was this thing they did on North Korean consumer technology, on like the handheld devices and things that they've been able to grab from that they'd been able to bring back from the DPRK when they were visiting there. And one of the things that was, and they publish all this stuff online, you can actually check it out. And one of the things it turns out is that these handheld devices have large collections of PDFs. I mean, and they except with this weird encryption, some sort of like custom thing that they did in North Korea just to fuck with the file format. It wasn't actually hard enough that anyone would take all that much effort to break it. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they describe it in this thing. If you search on YouTube, North Korean consumer technology, you'll find this thing. It's interesting. But so they converted these North Korean PDFs into normal PDF format, made them available in torrent, and it's basically, among other things, the entire secondary and primary school curriculum. All the textbooks for basically for K-12 education. And so I've been just sort of randomly reading through these because I'm just sort of curious what what they're telling kids in school. And also, one of the other things that they've got in there that I thought was really interesting is they have all these computer textbooks in there, including, which turn out actually mostly to be translations of US and British textbooks on network security, Linux, and a bunch of other things. And so I've just been reading these things lately, and it's kind of interesting to see how I hear a dog running around, which shouldn't be the case because she ought to be asleep. But there you go. She's an interesting dog. She's an Ewok who emits very high pitched sounds that will pierce your eardrum. It's very exciting. But there we are. Yes, Chloe. Yes, and she looks like an Ewok. She looks like an Ewok, and she sounds like an Elrad. Like just really, really loud, high pitched sounds anytime she wants something from you, or sometimes for no apparent reason. But she was supposed to be in bed now, so I'm actually kind of surprised to hear her running around all of a sudden. But there will be reasons. Yes. So, one of the interesting things is that I found in these textbooks, apart from the fact that the internet is discussed actually in some detail, considering how few people actually have access to it. The main thing that people can actually get to is something called Gwangmyeong, which is an intranet. But these textbooks actually are based on the idea that these principles are being applied to the internet, and I guess somebody has to be accessing it because North Korea's got websites on the web. It's a very useful place to have websites. They've tried putting them elsewhere, and they don't get as much visibility really. But yeah. So, but the language of it's interesting too, because they often have completely different words for the same concept because they like to avoid using English. In fact, they like to try to avoid using Chinese as well. There are lots of Chinese loan words in Korean. And their sort of idea is to try to only use native Korean words where they can do it. And so and if they can't do that, then they use Chinese ones and then once in a while you'll have, they'll just give up and it'll be Russian or English words. So you have very interesting sort of north-south differences that I actually have only sort of picked up when I've been sort of looking at Southern equivalents, like the word program. Is one that exists in both. Except in the north they say program, and in the south they say program, probably because they're getting it from the Russians in the north and from the Yanks in the south. And you get or weird little things like instead of the word for server in the north is bongsagi, because they didn't want to say soba, which pretty much everybody else on the planet except I think China uses. Bongsa is service, and then gi is a machine, so service machine. So yeah. Speaking of language, this is the sound of an entire stadium in Santiago telling Piñera to fuck himself at the Estadio Monumental today. Don't know if he was at the stadium, but certainly they made if he was, he certainly will have gotten a proper welcome. Apparently it continued on, but that's 38 seconds of it anyway. Yes. Is that a bowl emoji? Well, I guess it's sort of a dog. It's a dog that's got horns and is considerably larger, and it's sort of like a Saint Bernard, I guess. That works. Funny, I actually got more people on this the time it was totally unannounced. Well, it was later that time, too. I mean, that was like an hour later than this. Give it a few minutes. Welcome back. Bienvenido de nuevo. Well, yeah, I guess it is Friday night. Shabbos, isn't it? And the weird dog-related goings-on continue to go on. It's amazing how much louder things sound when they're above you. If you can hear it, you can hear better than I can because the parrot's asleep. Or I think maybe is. I'm actually not certain about that. Ought to be asleep. Mostly what you hear. Oh, well, yes, it is a late parrot. Oh, yeah, there's the parrot. Yes, that's the sort of thing that he says when he's not saying peekaboo or night, 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 or wishing people a good morning at about 7 p.m. Yeah, he's a Quaker parrot. They're interesting little creatures. They are about this big and have quite a lot more personality than you would think would fit into that sort of a container. And yeah, they're actually pretty good with words. Some of them, well, yes, but this is a living parrot. I mean, like he actually makes sounds and eats things and everything. And not a Norwegian blue. He's well, he's blue, but he's actually, if I remember correctly, this loro from Brazil. Loro brasileño. Está puro loreando, el sapo culiao. Oh yes, now he's being sung to sleep. That's the thing. It's actually the sweetest fucking thing ever. He'll say, because after the singing, he will say night, night, night. Well, in the sense that that's a place that's in Brazil, yes, but I don't know. I think probably the Amazon, though they're really adaptable little creatures too. I mean, there are colonies of them in just living in the wild in Chicago, which I'm told is not quite the same as the climate in Brazil. I've never been there. I've been to Barrio Brasil, but I don't think that's necessarily quite the same thing either. Is that hay una película que se llama así? Mejor un loro que un sapo. Ah, bueno, parece que no existe. Be a good title for a movie, though. Actually, there's a whole genre of jokes from the Soviet Union premised on the idea that people's parrots turn them in, basically. So it is possible to be both a loro and a sapo. Sapo is a term in a large part of South America, with certain exceptions that I can't think. I know in Colombia it's used, in Chile it's used. I don't think it's used in Peru. I don't have as many conversations about informants in Peru, though. But literally means toad, and the idea is that toads stare at you. And that is a pun that basically you can't. There's no language you can translate it. That basically only works in Chile because, see, loro, lorear, is a slang term for to look carefully, and it comes from the idea that parrots, loros, are looking carefully at things, and so sapear comes from sapo, which is a toad or an informant. So it's kind of crap in English. It's just to inform on somebody, you have to be looking first. But it's funny in Chile, and I think probably nowhere else. I don't think anyone else says lorear. Sapear, yeah, but not lorear. Apparently, for the second time in the past couple of months, somebody has been abducted in a vehicle belonging to Banco Santander in Chile. I had heard of a case. There was a case a couple of, I don't know, a month or so ago in Concepcion, where a friend of mine who works at Resumen.cl, major local news site, he actually witnessed it. I translated an article on it for him. Somebody, a bunch of armed military police came out of a fucking white vehicle, and somebody ran the plate, which is apparently, it's exceedingly easy to do in Chile. It's like they got to be the easiest place to do it. I've never heard of any place where you could just kind of look those things up, but it turned out to be belonging to Banco Santander. Yeah, the bank with the most annoying cash points in Britain. But then there was just a case like a couple hours ago. It was caught on film. Somebody just got abducted from Recoleta in the north of Santiago in a white van that somebody ran the plate, and it belonged again to fucking Banco Santander. So that's it's a sort of an odd activity for a bank to be Cerro Belén. Yeah, exactly. I was trying to remember what the new name for Cerro Santa Lucia is. Yeah, well, yeah, it's sort of an odd activity for a bank to be branching into, but I guess diversification is the thing, and hopefully, whoever it is manages to get away from them unscathed, and preferably those driving the car uh, emerge more or less scathed. I think someone like that could probably use a bit of scathing. Yeah, there it is. Peugeot Partner L1 HDI belonging to Banco Santander. Yeah. And an incompetent one too. I mean, he's just fucking ridiculous, really. I mean, he's like a slightly better looking version of Trump, but actually manages to be somehow worse. I mean, just worse at doing it. I mean, the one thing you can say for him is that he's managed to piss off so many people that he's destabilized himself, and hopefully that will turn out to be terminal. It'd be very nice. I mean, and to see him heading off on a one-way ticket to Miami or wherever the fuck assholes go these days. I mean, I guess, yeah, fuck, why not Miami? I mean, if you can make it past Tobalaba anyway. Okay, I'm sort of running short on things to talk about. Probably do this another time in the next couple of days again. Me scrolling through Wish ad for crack pipes and dildos. Oh god, the elections in the US. Oh, well, it's still the media are trying to sort of tantalize us with the prospect that Bernie Sanders, who's basically the one candidate who actually seems to be from the same